to February of 2022. So this was when the capital raise was announced. A capital raise featuring new investors and existing WNBA and NBA owners brought in $75 million that was used to supercharge the WNBA's business growth, including better marketing and more innovation. And this is when we talk about the split, you guys, and why it's very hard for players to get more of a revenue share than what they're asking for. 42% of the WNBA is owned by the WNBA, 42%.
Back in February 2022, the WNBA sold a 16% equity stake to an investor group for $75 million. At the time, it felt like a lifeline. The league desperately needed capital for growth, better marketing, and actual innovation. But fast forward to today, and that specific decision is at the center of the biggest negotiation crisis in women's basketball history. Here is what nobody was considering back then. What happens when the league suddenly explodes in value?
Owned by this investor group. Now, looking back at it, you guys, the WNBA was not doing well in 2022. So this might not have been a bad decision. This might have been a decision that they felt like they needed to make in order to continue the league, in order for the league not to fold, in order for, like they said here, to supercharge the business growth, to include better marketing and more innovation. And I've actually spoken to people who are much deeper in the WNBA circle than I am. And a lot of people, they say that Kathy has done a lot of things that have actually saved.
What happens when a media rights deal worth $2.2 billion lands on the table? That 16% stake that seemed so smart in 2022 is now the exact reason players can't get the revenue split they are demanding. The mathematical reality is brutal. The WNBA owns 42% of itself. The NBA owns another 42%. And that investor group controls the remaining 16%. So when players ask for a 50-50 revenue split like the NBA has, they aren't just negotiating with the league, they are negotiating with outside investors who have zero incentive to hand over profits to athletes they don't represent. This is the structural problem nobody wants to discuss. You can blame Kathy Engelbert all you want, but she was dealing with a league that had been losing money for years.
Off their first WNBA championship, the Las Vegas Aces unveiled a 64,000 square foot practice facility and headquarters in Henderson, Nevada. That's actually crazy if they were the first ones to kickstart this facilities in just 2023. And that's what I'm trying to paint this picture, you guys. The league has come so far since 2020. Since 2020 that they said it themselves, it was a groundbreaking CBA. They were still in the trenches. I'm sorry. A groundbreaking CBA. They were still in the trenches. They didn't really have practice facilities. They were sometimes practicing at
The bubble season in 2020 exposed just how underfunded everything was. Players stayed in subpar hotels and complained about food quality, while NBA players got the full Disney World treatment. The optics were terrible. But the financial reality was worse. The league simply didn't have the money to do better. Then came the prioritization rule, January 2020, part of that groundbreaking CBA that had players celebrating at the time. The rule was simple. If you play in the WNBA comes first. No more missing training camp because your overseas team made the playoffs. No more choosing Spain over Seattle because the money was better abroad. Players agreed to this because the alternative was worse. They were making $70,000 a year on rookie contracts. Diana Taurasi had literally been paid $1 million by a Russian team to skip an entire WNBA season.
Bigger and that much brighter on the WNBA, and I'm really glad that she mentions it here. It's just Caitlin Clark. It's always been just Caitlin Clark. Yes, there are other great young players who have come into this league, but it has truly been the Caitlin Clark effect. Even if you look at the viewership for Iowa this year, the viewership for Iowa in the past couple years, even after Caitlin Clark departed, there are still people that are tuned into Iowa when Iowa was never at the top of the viewership numbers. It's because of Caitlin Clark. When she came into the league, the Indiana Fever.
That is how unbalanced the economics were. Overseas teams could outbid the league for its own players. But here is where it gets complicated. Prioritization was supposed to be temporary, a bridge until WNBA salaries caught up. Now we are 5 years later, salaries have barely doubled, and new leagues like Unrivaled are offering $100,000 for 8 weeks of work. Players are starting to ask, Why are we prioritizing a league that still can't pay us what we're worth? April 2024 changed everything.
Sports rise in popularity, other college stars such as fellow 2024 draftee Angel Reese and more recently 2025 number one pick Paige Beckers also brought significant followings to the WNBA. And I will agree, they brought significant followings, but some of those followings haven't translated to viewership and attendance. And we've kind of also seen that in Unrivaled. And I'm not saying that all of the viewership woes in Unrivaled are because people aren't following Paige Beckers. Like, I don't think the product is that great either. But we've even seen when Caitlin Clark goes golfing, that's higher viewership than
Caitlin Clark gets drafted, and suddenly the WNBA isn't just growing anymore. It is exploding. Attendance records were shattered. Viewership numbers hit levels that hadn't been seen in 25 years. The Indiana Fever went from third to last in attendance to number one overnight. Not gradually, overnight. And this is where the players' frustration becomes legitimate. They opted out of the CBA in October 2024 because they could see what was coming. The media rights deal was about to land $200 million per year for 11 years. They knew if they didn't act fast, they would be locked into another contract that paid them a fraction of what the league was actually worth. But here is the reality check nobody wants to hear. That $2.2 billion media deal, it is not profit. It is revenue. The league still has massive expenses. Charter flights for every team, which they didn't have 2 years ago. New practice facilities being built across the league.
Straight up when Caitlin Clark got into the league, and it's like, I'm tired of talking about this. You guys have heard it from me so many times. We should be able to stop talking about this. But when there's still people who just deny reality, it is kind of strange. So in July 2024, the WNBA secures monumental media deal. The WNBA agreed to an 11-year media rights deal valued at $2.2 billion or $200 million per year with Disney, Amazon Prime, and NBC Universal. Then in October 2024, players opt out of previous CBA. January 2025, Unrivaled launches, and we talked about Unrivaled.
The Aces got a 64,000 square foot headquarters in 2023. The Fever are building a $100 million facility. The Wings were supposed to break ground on theirs, but it just got delayed until 2027. All of that costs money. Real money. Money that has to come from somewhere before players see their cut. And this is where the negotiation gets stuck. Players want 50% of revenue. Owners are offering something closer to 30%. The gap isn't just about greed. It is about fundamental disagreements over what constitutes sustainability. Then came the All-Star Game in February 2025. Players wore shirts that said, "Pay us what you owe us," during warm-ups. The message was clear. The execution, however, was questionable, because after making that statement, they went out and played one of the worst All-Star games in recent memory.
Then this was crazy, you guys, and we covered it. We were covering it daily because this was right before the WNBA finals. And if you remember, Nafisa Collier also got injured by Alyssa Thomas, and the Minnesota Lynx did not end up going to the finals. And I do always wonder, like, if they would have gone to the finals, I don't think Nafisa would have done this thing with Kathy. Like, I think she would have waited until after the WNBA finals, but it definitely took the spotlight off of the finals, which the finals were also trash. Like, the Aces swept Phoenix. There were more injuries. Like, Satu Sabli had that really
low effort, no dunks, barely any defense. Fans paid to see the best players in the world and got a glorified scrimmage. Compare that to the 2024 All-Star Game, which was actually competitive and exciting. The contrast was jarring, and it handed critics an easy argument. If you want to be paid like professionals, you need to play like professionals, even in exhibition games. Especially in exhibition games when you are trying to grow the fan base beyond the diehards. September 2025 brought the Nafisa Collier situation right before the WNBA finals. She went public with her frustrations about Kathy Engelbert.
The league forever. So you're going to have to enjoy the product that is on the court. And that should be the main focus, I feel like, for everyone. And if there's a great product, you will get paid more. The fans will come. The fans will want to watch. You will get the casual fans. You will get the NBA fans. You will get the male fans, which honestly, most sports fans are men. Like it or not, more men watch WNBA than women do. So it's like, in order to get the male sports fans from these other sports, you have to put out a good product. So I feel like that should always.
The timing was Deliberate. She knew it would dominate the news cycle, and it did. But it also pulled attention away from the finals themselves, which ended up being a disappointing sweep by the Aces over Phoenix. Here is what is interesting about that moment. Collier's team, the Minnesota Lynx, had just been eliminated. If they had made the finals, would she have said anything? Probably not. This suggests this wasn't just about principles. It was strategic. Use the platform when you have it, even if it means overshadowing the actual basketball. And that has become the pattern. The discourse around the WNBA is increasingly about everything except the product on the court. CBA negotiations, media rights deals, ownership structures, social activism, all important topics, but none of them matter if casual fans tune in and see a boring game. Which brings us to the fundamental tension. The WNBA has leverage right now because of Caitlin Clark, not because of the collective. It is because of one player who brought millions of eyeballs to the league. Iowa's viewership stayed elevated even after she left. The Fever became the most watched team in the league. When she goes golfing, it gets higher ratings than unrivaled games. That is not an opinion. That is measurable data. And it creates an awkward reality. The players are negotiating as a collective, demanding a revenue split based on the league's total value, but that value is disproportionately driven by one person. Angel Reese came into a Chicago Sky team that was already top 3 in attendance and dropped to bottom 5. Paige Buchers has a huge following, but it hasn't translated to unrivaled viewership the way people expected. The rising tide didn't lift all boats equally. It lifted Caitlin Clark's boat, and everyone else is trying to stay in her wake. So here is where we actually are. 3 months after Collier's exit interview, nothing has changed at the league level. The WNBA and the Players' Union are still working through CBA negotiations, still at an impasse, still fighting over the same fundamental questions. Can the league afford a 50-50 revenue split when 16% of the league is owned by outside investors who won't agree to it? Can players demand NBA-level salaries when the product still isn't consistently delivering NBA-level entertainment? Can the league sustain charter flights and $100 million facilities while also doubling player salaries? These aren't rhetorical questions. They are the actual math problem both sides are trying to solve. And here is what makes it even more complicated. The players have more leverage than they've ever had, but that leverage has an expiration date. Caitlin Clark's rookie contract runs for 4 years. If the league doesn't capitalize on this moment, if they don't lock in sustainable economics while the spotlight is brightest, they might not get another chance like this for a decade. That is the pressure on both sides right now. Players know this is their best opportunity to get paid. Owners know this is their best opportunity to build a foundation that lasts beyond one transcendent player. Look at what happened in 2020. The CBA they signed then was called groundbreaking. Players celebrated it. 6 years later, they are looking at $70,000 rookie contracts and wondering what they were thinking. The lesson is clear. Whatever deal gets signed now will define the league for the next decade. Get it wrong, and you are stuck with it. The comparison to overseas leagues keeps coming up, but it is misleading. Yes, Diana Taurasi made $1 million in Russia, but she was the only player on that team making that kind of money. The middle and bottom tier players were making less than they would in the WNBA. The same is true in EuroLeague now. A few stars get paid extremely well. Everyone else is fighting for scraps. That is the model some people are suggesting for the WNBA. Let teams spend whatever they want. Let rich owners throw money around. Create a system where the best players get paid like superstars, even if it means other players get left behind. But that destroys parity. And parity is the only reason the WNBA has stayed competitive. In a league where any team can win on any given night, fans stay engaged all season. You lose that, and you end up with the same 3 teams competing for championships every year while everyone else plays out the string. The charter flight situation from 2022 is the perfect example. The Liberty got fined $500,000 for chartering flights and taking an unsanctioned team trip to Napa. At the time, it was considered a violation of competitive balance. Now every team charters. The league realized that player health and performance matter more than strict equality of resources. That is the evolution that needs to happen with salaries too. But it is tricky, because the moment you allow teams to spend freely, you create dynasties. The richest owners win. The smallest markets get left behind. And suddenly, you aren't building a sustainable league. You are building a playground for billionaires. The Aces facility in 2023 kicked off a facilities race that is still ongoing. Teams realized they needed to invest in infrastructure if they wanted to compete for top players. But not every market can afford a 64,000 square foot headquarters. Not every owner has the resources to build a $100 million practice facility. So what happens to those teams? Do they just accept being farm systems for the big markets? Do they fold? Do they relocate? These are the questions expansion is supposed to answer. But expansion also dilutes talent. You are adding teams in markets that might not be ready, spreading players thinner, hoping the rising tide lifts those boats too. And maybe it does. Maybe the Caitlin Clark effect is big enough to sustain 16 teams, then 18, then maybe the media rights deal is just the beginning, and the next one will be even bigger. Maybe in 5 years, we're looking back at this negotiation and laughing at how small $200 million per year seemed. Or maybe this is the peak. Maybe the league is experiencing a bubble driven by one generational talent. And when she retires or loses a step, the viewership crashes back to 2022 levels. Maybe the investment in facilities and charter flights becomes unsustainable, and teams start cutting costs again. That is the risk both sides are weighing. Players want to maximize their earnings now, while the leverage is high. Owners want to protect themselves against a future where the money dries up. Both positions are rational. Both positions are self-interested, and that is why they are stuck. The bubble season in 2020 feels like ancient history now, but it has only been 5 years. Players were staying in mediocre hotels, eating subpar food, playing in empty gyms with piped-in crowd noise. The contrast to the NBA bubble was embarrassing, and Kathy Engelbert took the blame for that. But here's the thing. The WNBA didn't have the money to do better. The league had been subsidized by the NBA for decades. The capital raise in 2022 was an attempt to break that dependency, to bring in outside investment and build something self-sustaining. Did it work? Partially. The league got the resources to improve conditions. But it also gave up equity that now complicates revenue sharing. Was it worth it? We won't know for another 5 years. What we do know is that the players are running out of patience. They see the media rights deal. They see the sold-out arenas. They see Caitlin Clark's jersey outselling everyone in the NBA except LeBron James. And they are asking, where's our cut? The answer is complicated. Because the money is real, but so are the expenses. Because the leverage is real, but so is the risk. Because the future looks bright, but it is not guaranteed. So where does this end? Most likely, somewhere in the middle. Players won't get 50-50, but they will get more than 30%. Owners won't maintain complete control, but they will protect themselves against worst-case scenarios. The CBA will get signed. Everyone will claim victory. And in 6 years, we will be right back here, having the same argument. Unless something fundamental changes. Unless the league finds a way to generate revenue that doesn't depend on one player. Unless the product on the court becomes consistently excellent, not just occasionally exciting. Unless the fan base grows beyond the diehards and the Caitlin Clark fans and becomes something sustainable. That is the real question. Not whether players deserve more money. They do. Not whether owners are being greedy. Some are, some aren't. The real question is whether the WNBA can build something that lasts. Something that survives the retirement of its biggest star. Something that justifies the investment everyone is making right now. Because if they get this wrong, if they sign a CBA that looks great today but falls apart in 3 years, the consequences won't just be financial. They will be existential. The league has momentum right now. Squander it, and you might not get it back. So what do you think? Are the players asking for too much too soon? Or are the owners refusing to recognize the league's actual value? Should the WNBA prioritize sustainability over immediate player earnings? Or is this the moment to go all in while the spotlight is brightest? Drop your take in the comments, hit that subscribe button, And let's keep this conversation going, because this negotiation isn't just about money, it's about the future of women's basketball.